Hello, YouTube, and hello to Kevin Pembroke. Pembroke. Let's see. This is a hangout, really, just to respond to um, some questions that I was asked by a Christian. I responded to a post from Jungle Jargon, and I'll go ahead and do a screen share so you can kind of look at what I'm looking at here. Let's see. And so it's basically kind of one of those the end is nigh, repent kind of deals. And my initial response to Jungle Jargon was just, well, I sought after the God of the Bible for really more than 30 years, and I I came to the conclusion that I never found any such being. Uh, and I asked Jungle Jargon if he's ever actually heard from this deity. So um, Kevin, who I don't know if I've interacted with him before. If I have, I don't remember, and forgive me, Kevin. Um, but he asked, well, what if it was 30 years, why didn't I quit after 5 or 10 years? And so I gave him an answer, and I think that's a good question. Why didn't I give up sooner? Um, I'm the answer to that, I guess, is a little complicated. I grew up in the church. I my earliest memories are being in the church, and to be more specific, I was raised in the Assemblies of God, and it was a fundamentalist um, and charismatic church. They were firm believers in kind of a literal Bible, to the extent that you can take the Bible literally. They tried to employ that. So they believed in a young Earth for the most part. Now, they weren't so dogmatic about the interpretation of the Book of Genesis, that there were no one in the church believed that the Earth was old, or that wasn't a doctrinal point that they kind of emphasized, or nobody got kicked out of the church or anything like that. You could even I believe that there were people who believed that evolution was the best explanation for the origins, as far as from a scientific perspective. um, Toward my later teen years, and even into college, I definitely was persuaded that evolution was the best kind of explanation of how it happened. But I would have still said that I believed that God was kind of the why and the who behind it. Making the assumption that a who is even a question that is a reasonable question to ask. But um, at any rate, so and I was not I wasn't a skeptical person. I just kind of believed what I was taught. Everybody my whole family were firm believers. Um, and I was, we were very involved with the church. We were there Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday nights. I was involved into my teen years in the youth group, and I participated in kind of extracurricular stuff. I was there for choir and kind of worship band and things like that. I have a choir. I wasn't really involved with the choir as much. But by the time I kind of came of age, the choir was not so much a thing. But I was definitely involved with the youth group worship team. I was involved. There was an orchestra and things for special occasions, and I participated in that even. and I was a fairly talented musician. I excelled, and I had our my school that I attended. Went to a public school. They had a strong band program there, and I was kind of always at the top of the pack. My freshman year in high school, I got first chair in the top band. Um, and basically held that until my senior year, when I kind of started sloughing off and um, wasn't practicing as much. But the music kind of came naturally to me. I was My freshman and sophomore years in high school, I was very involved with the high school jazz ensemble, but they they practiced on a Wednesday night, which was a conflict with the youth group. And for a couple of years, I kind of went back and forth and did an alternating. So one Wednesday night I would go to the jazz ensemble, and the next Wednesday night I would go to the youth group, and participate in the service there and things. And my parents allowed me to do that. They wanted me to kind of start making some decisions on my own, and ultimately, I came to the decision, I think it was my junior or senior year, that I wanted to commit, more fully to God's service at the times. And uh, you know, I attended a Christian college after high school, because that's kind of the environment that I wanted to be in. I wanted to be surrounded by other Christians. I wanted to pursue higher education, but I wanted to do it like I said, in an atmosphere where I wasn't so tempted or whatever, and I didn't want to end up in a party culture or something like that at a public university. Um, or that was my fear at the time, that I would fall prey to temptation there. I maintained my faith. I didn't finish there, and I actually fell prey to temptation at the Christian school. Um, but I got married, started having kids, and it was the Christian university was too expensive. So, my wife finished her degree at a state school, while I kind of worked and helped take care of the kids some. While she finished her degree, she didn't have as much to go as I did, and it just kind of made sense for her to finish up what she had. She also kind of knew what she was going for, and I still hadn't decided on what I wanted to study exactly, or what kind of career path I wanted. Um, Anyhow, the long story short, I guess, is that all through this time, where we were working our way through school, and um, trying to raise a young family and things, my faith was intact, and I really just kind of believed, mostly because uh, that's the way I was raised, and I I questioned my faith to the degree that, um, I guess I was comfortable. I wanted to believe, because the alternative of not believing was really kind of a frightening prospect to me. I definitely believed in hell, and I believed that Jesus was the Son of God, and and I was committed to believing that. Um, I'm sure, in not you know entirely, because I was afraid of hell, but that was certainly a part of it. And I know, my brother was he was younger than me, and there came a time when he revealed to the family that he was not a believer anymore, and he was not a Christian. And that just was a devastating and horrific prospect to me. The idea that he would be going to hell, and so that shook my faith. Um, so it didn't. I mean, I shouldn't say that it shook my faith. At that time, it was just kind of really, really bad news. I mean, um, I think I took that news almost as bad as if someone had said, "Oh, your brother got into a car wreck, and he's really badly injured or had died." I mean, uh, it was close to that. I cried, I wept for his soul at the time, and I really believed that and I prayed and prayed and prayed that as well as the rest of my family, we all prayed for his eventual return to salvation and to Christianity. Um, and where am I going with this? So this was into my 20s, and I eventually was able to go back to school to finish my degree. I was still a believer at this point. When I went back to school, I studied. I got involved in studying philosophy. There was an ethics course that was just part of the general core curriculum, um, and just that taste of philosophy just drew me in. Uh, I just loved it, and I decided, well, man, what a great way for me to really evaluate my own beliefs. I was interested at the time. I had kind of started a process of questioning the kind of the political views that I had been raised to hold. Um, and I really wanted to form political views that were in line with the Bible, and I didn't want to take someone else's word that kind of this conservative Christian right wing political views were exactly the way that um, the God of the Bible intended us to interact in society in a democratic society. And so I kind of started a process of questioning those assumptions or just beliefs that were kind of thrust upon me from my own family and from the church where I grew up. And I came to the conclusion, through kind of that process, that a lot of my political views were wrong and were mistaken. Um, so uh, I shifted that way, and then as I went through and started to study philosophy, um, the other things that I studied were kind of Eastern religions and other world religions and things like that, and I also studied history just in college. And a lot of kind of the portrayal of the arc of history as I learned from the church seemed not to be true. And uh, that this whole idea that kind of Christianity spawned science and democracy and all of these things. Well, it's true that the culture that was predominantly Christian, that these things kind of percolated there and filtered up through. But really, as it turns out, and as I was reading the history on these things, it was a lot of these kind of heathen Greek thinkers or pagan Greek thinkers who they were in a process of questioning their beliefs and things and assumptions, and through that process, they started to kind of postulate and think, well, what if we just question things and see what's left when we're finished kind of pulling at all the different threads that we have put together in this kind of tapestry of beliefs that we hold. Um, and through that process, they kind of developed some rudimentary, basic principles of science that were fleshed out, and are continuing to be fleshed out in the philosophy of science and things. But that was the start of it. Was in this Greek culture that was certainly not Christian, and other important ideas like democracy and things also were born out of Greek culture and came into Roman culture as well and was absorbed there some. Um, this was forgotten for hundreds of years during the Dark Ages when the church was dominant, and superstition was dominant, and then as people started to read some of these ancient texts, there was renewed interest in them, kind of at the onset of the Enlightenment, and those ideas then spread and were perpetuated, and that's kind of what started people challenging the church authority, challenging political authority, and things like that. And then we end up with Voltaire and Russell and Locke, and Hobbes, and all of these Enlightenment thinkers, uh, which contributed to the ideas and kind of inspiration for the American Revolution, the American Constitution, um, and so there, that's a very different story than what I was kind of taught in church and in Sunday school and things like that. Um, the church really kind of tried to latch on and lay claim to a lot of these ideas, and the same with science. I mean, and in fact, the church authorities and things were very kind of butted heads with the ideas uh, that were uncovered, and facts that were uncovered by Galileo and others. And we still see this going on today in the church, that the church is kind of hanging on to these ideas from the past, and when we find evidence that those ideas are mistaken, they fight tooth and nail to try and hold on to those things. But through all of this process, I really still maintained my faith. Uh, I wouldn't. My arguments or my defense of my faith changed and shifted. In the past, in the high school, I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine um, who was raised Catholic, but who had left her faith and things. And I remember just kind of spouting out these narratives about how, well, God has really shaped the arc of history, and we can see from the Old Testament that it predicts and kind of foreshadows the coming of Christ, and all of these things, uh, and that Christ is the ultimate sacrifice, and through him we have fullness and life, and all of these kinds of things. uh by the time I hit my 30s, I would have said, well, how do I know that God is real? I would have said, well, the difference that he's made in my own life, and how I was stuck in the sin of lust and things like that. And um that was my essentially my testimony, that I was kind of freed, and I would use air quotes around that, from um kind of lustful thoughts and things. Well, it was never really true. I still struggled with those kinds of things, and tried to fight my instincts, but never really got an answer to my prayers on that. uh, and and as I kind of opened up and tried to be more honest about it, I realized, well, was there anything I really did get an answer to prayer on? And I reflected back on situations in my own family and in the church, where people were deathly ill, and there was a situation involving cancer. um, a young woman, and she had been treated, and they thought it was successful at first, and then she went through a remission a couple of years later, and very quickly uh, the cancer took her life. Our pastor had a heart issue. He wasn't old by any stretch. I think he was in his 50s, and he became very ill, and he also passed away. Um, in spite of the fact that the whole church body and uh, people from across the state and probably across the country were praying for him. He was very loved. I mean, he was a decent guy. Um, there was a young baby in my own family, and we prayed and prayed and prayed. I prayed like I'd never prayed before, uh, and this was in my teen years. And um, you know, the the baby had surgery and things, but died. It was only a couple of weeks old. Uh, and then there was a one other instance where my there were two young men in our youth group who had hemophilia when they were kids. And I suppose older than that too. But when they were kids, they got blood transfusions as part of the treatment, and this was before the understanding about HIV and AIDS, and how that was spread. And they contracted HIV and AIDS through their blood transfusions when they were just kids. So it wasn't that they were sexually promiscuous. I think one of them had just recently married and even had a young daughter. Um, and the other one was only like 16 years, 17 years old. But they both very quickly uh, became ill, and they both died. And again, our whole church just prayed and prayed and prayed for a miracle. Uh, and not a single one of these instances um, ever shook my faith at the time. But reflecting back on a whole, half of a lifetime of sincere, desperate prayer for in situations like this, I came to realize there were no answers to prayer. I also asked myself, well, okay, I've said, in conversations with people who were skeptical or non-believers and things, what do you? I would say things like, well, I'm not big on religion, but I am big on Jesus, or I believe that I'm in a relationship with God. And I started to ask myself, what does that even mean? If I'm in a relationship and there is another person on the other end of this, um, you know, what is it that I'm actually engaging with? Am I engaging with another person? Um, and I think uh, Matt Dillahunty on the Atheist Experience gives an illustration. I forget exactly what the specific scenario was that he used this. Oh, I know what it is. It's in the. It has to do with the problem of hard solipsism. Can we know that we're not a brain in a vat and things like that? So, if his argument was, well, if I was the only mind that is out there, that would mean that my mind is responsible for all of the great art and music and paintings and sculptures and all of these things, and magnificent buildings, and he says, and I just can't come up with those things. So I'm pretty confident, and also literature is another thing. I'm pretty confident. I can be confident that there are other minds exist, um, because no matter how hard I try, I couldn't produce something like that. And so I know uh, that there's got to be something else. Maybe it's only one other mind, but at least this one other mind exists out there. Uh, as I kind of think about the way I would parse this, I would say I'm not convinced that there is another supernatural mind. I'm convinced that there are other people. I have a wife. I know that I can converse with her. I can talk to her. Um, She hears what I say, and responds. She says things that wouldn't have occurred to me. She tells me about things that I haven't experienced because she works in a different place than I do. She knows people that I don't know, and and tells me things, and I know that those things are not things that I know about. So I'm evaluating whether or not um, I'm actually in a relationship with a deity. I had to come to the conclusion that there was nothing. And so one of the things that you asked me, Kevin, was what specifically did I ask for? What kind of information? Just something that I don't know. It wasn't necessarily anything specific, but I know looking back, just like I know looking back over the 30 years that I've never experienced anything miraculous ever. Period. There was nothing that was miraculous. People, talked about being healed of a headache. People talked about being healed of sore back. Um, People talked about being healed. Uh, that was most of it. Tummy aches, and anything that can kind of go away, or they would have surgeries and involve a lot of medicine and medical treatment that's based in science, and then people would give a credit to this deity. Well, I mean, the same thing can happen when you don't believe in the deity, when you don't involve prayer. But if you take away the medical treatments for somebody that's been in an accident and just try a prayer, they're not going to do well if it's any kind of serious accident. And so, the same kinds of things. I mean, if I'm asking, if I was in conversations with friends who weren't believers, and I ran into a lot of different friends uh, in college that weren't believers. If there was really a deity, he could have given me information about them, personal information about them, uh, that I didn't know myself. And he could have said, well, you know, hey, Josh, Jesus has just told me that when you were 5 years old, X, Y, and Z happened, and that really had an impact on your life. And, I really feel like Jesus can give you healing from that circumstance, whatever it might have been, or anything like that. Nothing has ever happened to me like that, and I've not had anything um, that uh, was reflected back to me from someone else that was anything like that. And that kind of stuff happens in the Bible all the time. I mean, Jesus talked to Zacchaeus, and to the woman at the well, supposedly, and Matthew, the tax collector, and he kind of had these insights into their lives and who they were and what was going on and things. Um, and whether, I mean, I don't know if Jesus is supposed to be omniscient himself, or if he got those insights from God the Father, uh, and without delving into problems with the Trinity or whatever, um, it's really immaterial. But if that same deity who is omniscient, uh, and I have a relationship with him, I should have access to some of this information once in a while, right? That just seems to make sense to me, and I didn't have it. Another thing that you asked, Kevin, was what I meant, or what is meant by um, my tagline on my Google Plus profile. It says, "I used to be a Christian, and then I read the Bible." Well, that's really kind of a glib statement, and I spoke to this a bit in our conversation. But I in when I studied philosophy, like I said, I studied these other religions and things, and I studied some of their texts, and I came to the realization Well, I didn't find those texts, those sacred texts, persuasive. I've read a little bit of the Quran. I've read a little bit of the Book of Mormon. I've read, more extensively in like the Bhagavad Gita and the Vedas and some of the Taoist literature and things. None of those really impressed me very much, and I could identify some problems with them, and I said, well, I really don't think that these are divinely inspired. Um, and I asked myself, well, what if I approached the Bible with the same kind of scrutiny and skepticism that I am applying to these other religious texts? Um, and so I kind of started to look into it, and I uh, looked into some criticisms that were leveled by secular scholars of the Bible. Um, Bart Ehrman is one who I found very interesting and informative, and he really is just taking Ehrman really just looks at the actual scriptures, the kind of the ancient codexes that uh, we derive our modern translations and understandings of scriptures. Um, that's where it all comes from, and um, so he's very knowledgeable about that. He has studied those ancient languages and ancient texts that uh, that we derive the Bible from today, and he provides many multiple examples of problems with the text itself, with these ancient manuscripts, and and I mean, these are valid criticisms, uh, but even before I got into all of that, I came to the realization that there's a lot of serious moral problems with the Bible, and kind of the I had been struggling some with the idea of eternal damnation, the idea that my brother, who is in general a really good person, who is caring and generous and a good guy. I mean, he's an honest, good, hardworking guy, and the idea that just because he doesn't believe that um, this deity created the world, and and that we're somehow bad from the time that we're born, um, in and that we're so bad and so disgusting to him that he wants to torture us all forever, but he's also wants to not torture us forever, and so he uh, gives himself a body so that we could kill it, uh, and through that strange, whatever it is, he pays the price of our disgustingness to himself so that he can stop torturing anybody that believes it. That that right there was a serious problem to me, and just that, and that's the core of the faith. Um, and I was really struggling to try and make sense of that at this stage of the game, and approaching it from someone who didn't just accept it, because this is what everybody accepts because of the culture that I'm in. Trying to approach it from the eyes of someone who was coming across this for the first time. That was kind of the approach that I was trying to take, and it just seemed absurd. It seemed kind of twisted to me, and uh, so with kind of this in the background, I started becoming dissatisfied with the church that we had been attending, and we tried a different church for a little while. Um, I still had a lot of questions, but I was still trying to. I mean, I wanted to try and make sense of this. because, as I said, giving it up um, just still seemed so just kind of off the board for me. I would have always said growing up that I would never doubt my faith. I could never leave my faith because it meant so much to me. Well, the truth started to become more important to me than holding on to this belief, and I was no longer willing to kind of cover my eyes to hide the bad stuff. Um, Eventually, I started just kind of jumping around from church to church, looking for something to find purchase in. I was sitting in a Sunday school class, or an adult Bible study one Sunday morning in the church that I had never been to before, and we read the stories of Achan in the book of Joshua, and and then right, next in the very next story we read within the same, I guess, hour long or so Bible study, we read the story of David and Bathsheba, and as I listened to the story of Achan, and I'd heard it before, and my response growing up, the response that I was kind of taught to take on that story was, well, God is just, and He issued a just punishment for this Achan who disobeyed His command. Um, and again, kind of approaching this from with the eyes of someone trying to look at it with fresh eyes, with some skepticism and doubt and um, just questions. I began to read it very differently. It was, to me at this moment, the story of a leader of a tribe of people who was, going about trying to conquer other peoples in his area, and was using the authority of a god figure and to kind of bolster his own authority. If you read the story, he sends an attack to, I think it's the city of Ai, and sends in 300, or no, 3,000 men. Was it 300? I forget what it is, but anyhow, some number of men, and just has them kind of march up to the city gates to attack and conquer the city. Well, this the city um, sees them coming because it's, really there's no strategy at all. It's just go get them, and the men are routed. Well, that's when he decides there's got to be, someone to blame for this, and he finds Achan, uh, who uh, disobeyed the law, or the rule about, it wasn't even a law, it was just a rule, and this rule wasn't universal. It only applied in this battle, this previous battle, I should say, that they weren't supposed to take the um, valuables at the last city that they attacked. Well, Achan disobeyed that, and he kept some of the valuables for himself. My guess is this guy is probably just a peon nobody, who took a few things, because he probably didn't have very much of anything. He's never spoken about before. He's never mentioned after the fact again. And from, by all appearances, he's a scapegoat. Well, the very next thing that happens is Achan sends in something like 10 times the force after Achan and his whole family are, just stoned to death and burned. Um, just brutal punishment for taking stuff from dead people. And he's blamed for their military failure. Well, then um, Joshua sends in 10 times the troops, and has kind of a sneaky strategy where they, a small number of them run up to the city gates and then run back out with all of the people from AI in pursuit, and then they ambush the mass and then run into the city gates that are unprotected now because all of the people from AI, or all the military people, and then they go out slaughtering and killing everybody, and they won. Well, of course, now, according to the Bible, uh, the reason for their victory is because God has found favor in them. Well, it's because they, I mean, anybody with sense reads this story and says, no, it's because he used 10 times the military force that he used the first time, and they employed an actual strategy for defeating them. So there was no justice there, and the idea that brutally slaughtering a man for stealing from dead people, for breaking this rule that really is the equivalent of going through an intersection on a red light. Well, it's not illegal to go through an intersection. There's nothing inherently immoral about going through an intersection. You broke a law, and by doing something just at a time when there was no green light, essentially. Because in the very next battle, in this battle against the city of AI, after they massacre Achan and his family, um, Joshua says, "Well, you can take all of their valuables for yourself." So there's the green light for this crime, um, or this act that ended up in the death of the man and his whole family. And why was the wife and the children? Why were they killed for this crime? It just seemed so immoral and so wrong. And then right after that, we looked at the story of David. He's a powerful leader. He's a king. Um, and I'm sure you're familiar with it. He kills, or he sleeps with one of his loyal soldiers' wives. Tries to cover it up. She's pregnant, and ends up having the guy killed. And it's just he lied. He committed adultery and basically conspired to kill the man. All of these things are immoral, and they're immoral in any society, in every culture. There's never a green light for these acts. It's never okay to go out and kill a man because you are trying to cover up your crime or your sin. It's never okay to take another man's wife and sleep with her and get her pregnant. I mean, this is not okay. And yet, unlike Achan, who is a nobody, David doesn't even lose his throne. So David's not killed. His family's not killed and slaughtered and massacred. He doesn't even lose control. He doesn't even lose the power. If either of these situations happened today, nobody in their right mind would say, "Well, this is justice," um, and nobody would accept them independently. Certainly, no one would accept them, you know, as just looking at them side by side, because on the one hand, a nobody gets just the absolute brutal, horrific punishment, and on the other end, this king, the guy in political power, kind of gets away scot free. And the poor guy that gets brutally massacred is clearly just a scapegoat for bad military strategy and things. And Joshua doesn't want to look bad, so he blames this guy's sin. Well, do you think that there really was no one else in the whole you know country of, or I guess population of 12 tribes of Israel, no one else committed a sin during that time? It was only this one man's sin, um, who caused this military failure. That just doesn't ring true even if you believe in the kind of this magic idea of sin and things. So uh, after that, that was kind of the last straw for me. Reading those stories, and then just basically anywhere that I looked in the Old Testament, and even in the New Testament. Although I do say there are better things going on in the New Testament, but even if you accept that and say, well, things got better, well, why didn't we start with that? Why do we have to go at it twice to get it right? And even in the New Testament, there are still problems. I mean, slavery is not abolished. There's no indication of what to do when and if you as Christians come into political authority, like happens before the Middle Ages. The Christians come into power, and because there are no strict guidelines or uh, kind of direction as to how to handle that kind of power and authority, things are pretty terrible. It really is not. It's not a great situation. Um, there's all kinds of abuses, and heretics are burned and things like this. Uh, it's not until we stop, uh, you know, taking for granted these ideas and start questioning them. It was after thousands of years of history that we started to kind of piece together the idea, well, power can be a dangerous thing, and even people who seem like they're going to be a good leader, if they have unchecked power, it's going to go to their head, and they're going to start abusing people. Um, so, at any rate, I've prattled on for much longer than I intended to. But these are the kinds of things that led me out of my faith, and it came to a point when I just can't. I can no longer read the Bible, um, and not see these glaring problems. Slavery. Is just is a horrific institution. The idea and the other uh, idea that women had no power or authority or even value really apart from their ability to produce male offspring for their husbands and things, and that's clearly um, the thread throughout the Old Testament. um, you look at other cultures in the same region at this time, and they're all kind of doing the same things. It just that's the way the culture was back then. We can look at these other cultures, and if Yahweh was a real God who was inspiring the Hebrews, there was a very similar God inspiring some of the other cultures in Mesopotamia and in that area, um, you know, doing some similar things. If this really was a good God, um, why didn't He make their rules and their laws better? I think it makes just much more sense to understand it for what it appears to be. It's people who kind of invented a god. Um, it gave their society some cohesiveness and lent itself to give the authorities, the men in charge, some additional kind of power and authority that they wouldn't have had without having claims to this deity. Um, it makes so much more sense that way. And as far as one of the last things that kind of was a domino to fall, I suppose, was the idea that, well, there are these prophecies, but uh, you know the prophecies that are identified in New Testament that are supposedly fulfilling the Old Testament prophecies, those things are not, what one, they're not even considered prophecies in the Old Testament. They were things that were just written at the time. Sometimes they were written about a king that existed at the time, um, and then we're going to pull these in and say, well, this is about this guy Jesus. It's prophetic when it was about somebody else, and we don't know. We really have no way of verifying that the stories about Jesus are true. Um, we don't have a birth certificate for Jesus. Um, we don't know what city he was born in. We don't know um, who his parents were. Uh, they couldn't even get um, his lineage right in the genealogy past his earthly father. And why did they give a genealogy through his male parent, um, from whom he supposedly had no genetic relationship at all? Why not give it through Mary? Mary was at least half Mary, right? That doesn't make any sense. He's it's and Joseph's father, so Jesus's grandfather, isn't even the same when you look at the account in Matthew and what's the other one, Luke, I think. Um, the grandfathers are listed as two different people. So uh, there's just so much, even from the very get-go, that doesn't make any sense. One tells about a flight to Egypt, and another one doesn't. And um, uh, there are all these historical points in there that reference leaders, and some of the leaders um, didn't exist until later, and some of them existed before but were already dead when you know such and such an event was supposedly going on. There's no account outside of the Bible of this mass slaughter of male babies in the area, and certainly that would have been something that people would have noticed and commented on. None of the accounts of Jesus's life were even written down until decades after his supposed life. So all of these things really make the Bible very shaky and problematic. And um, with all of that, if I still was able to see, okay, when Christians pray, stuff happens. If that was the case, or that I could have had some actual interaction, some kind of, maybe not tangible, but definite interaction with another mind, um, either audibly, that I was perceiving, or inaudibly, but that that it was undeniable that there was this other mind there. I'd still be able to say, okay, I don't know all the answers to all these questions about the Bible, but there's definitely something going on here. I don't have any of that. And so, looking at all of these different things, I just was left to the conclusion. The reason that it was 30 years, it took me 30 years to get that far, was just because that was the point when I was able to really kind of take an objective look at it, to be able to look back on a, like I said, 3 decades of trying to make this work and trying to make it make sense. I gave it the very best that I could, and I genuinely uh, believed for those years that I identified myself as a Christian. Um, so I'm just left with, either if there is something to it, I can't I don't have any explanation as to why it didn't work for me, because I was as sold out and convinced that it was real and true, as I think is humanly possible. And that's really all I have. So I hope that answers your question. Kevin, if you would be interested in having a hangout, I would be more than happy to hear what you have to say about your faith and your beliefs. I would love to just ask you questions about it. And I think if you'll look over any of my other videos, you'll see that I think I'm very respectful. I don't try to trap people and, um, ask gotcha questions or whatever, or play. I'm not interested in playing philosophical games or um, whatever. I'm really interested in what is true, and if you have something that you can share with me uh, that is true, that we can, that I can be persuaded by, I'd be more than happy. My lack of faith has put a distance between myself and my parents and my sisters for sure. Um, and my grandfather as well. I have a grandfather who's still living. I saw him this summer, and there was, we got to talk, and we had a nice time talking, but there was a distance there, and he was clearly sad that I was not a believer. Um, and that, it would be great for me to be able to say, oh, I actually believe again. I talked to Kevin, or if you didn't want the credit, whatever. I come to the realization that I was wrong. That there is this deity out there, who is, I guess, the God of the Bible, and that would be fantastic. And you'd have a whole bunch of people uh, thanking you and celebrating, including me. I'd be more than happy, if it was true. I guess, I'd still have concerns about my brother, obviously, but I'd be, and all of the other people that are going to be, supposedly burning in hell. But I guess one step at a time, right? Um, and also, I've been in a couple other conversations with other believers. Please hit me up if you have time and you're interested. I really just enjoy talking with people whose views are different than mine, and I would love to have a conversation with any one of you, or a couple of you at a time, if that's your preference. So anyhow, like I said, this has gone on for much longer than I intended. I hope that anyone who has been watching has enjoyed it, and let me know if you have questions or comments. You can paste them down below. Take care. Have a good night, everyone.